Mm, my sister called me delusional the day I filed the paperwork. She said it standing in my mother's kitchen, leaning against the counter with a glass of white wine in her hand, like we were just having a casual conversation. Like she hadn't just watched our parents tell my 4-year-old daughter that they couldn't make it to her spring recital because they had already booked a trip to Sedona. Sedona. A spa weekend in Sedona was more important than watching Lily perform her first ever ballet piece in front of an auditorium full of parents and grandparents who actually showed up. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. My name is not important right now. What's important is that for most of my adult life, I believed that family was supposed to be the one thing you could count on when everything else fell apart. I was 31 years old, I had a daughter, and I was 2 years out of a marriage that had quietly destroyed me from the inside. My ex-husband Marcus had walked out when Lily was barely 2. No fight, no drama. He just decided one morning that he wasn't built for the life we had built together, and he left. He paid child support barely, and he called Lily on her birthday most years. That was the extent of his involvement. So it was me and Lily, just us. I had worked my way up to a senior compliance analyst position at a financial firm downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and more importantly, I was good at it. I understood numbers, I understood systems, I understood exactly how to find the things someone didn't want you to find. That skill would become very relevant later. My parents, Richard and Patricia, I'll just call them my father and my mother because that's what they were, technically, had always had a complicated relationship with my choices. They adored Lily in the way grandparents adore children from a distance. Birthday cards, occasional dinners, a check at Christmas. But they had made it quietly, consistently clear over the years that my sister Amber was their priority. Amber was younger, more polished, married to a man named Derek whom my father described as a real provider, and they lived 20 minutes away in a bigger house in a nicer neighborhood. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment 25 minutes in the other direction. The math of how much my parents showed up for Amber versus how much they showed up for me and Lily was not something I examined too closely for a long time, because I think some part of me knew what I would find if I did. The recital happened on a Saturday in March. Lily had been practicing for 3 months. Every evening after dinner she would put on her little ballet slippers in the living room and go through her routine, counting under her breath, her tongue poking out the side of her mouth when she concentrated. She had asked me approximately 47 times whether Grandma and Grandpa were coming. I had told her yes every single time because that is what my mother had told me on the phone in January. We'll be there, of course we'll be there, mark us down for 2 seats. I marked them down. I saved them seats in the 3rd row, 2 cushioned chairs right on the aisle, because my mother had a bad knee and didn't like to climb over people. I put a little handwritten card on each one that said, reserved for Grandma and Grandpa. Lily had made the cards herself with markers and stickers. She had drawn a flower on each one. They texted me at 11 a.m. the morning of the recital. My father sent it. The message said, "Sweetheart, so sorry, we ended up booking Sedona last minute and we fly out this morning. We'll make it up to Lily. Promise. Send us a video." The recital was at 2 in the afternoon. I read that text standing in the bathroom while Lily was eating her breakfast in the kitchen. I read it 3 times. I put my phone face down on the counter, and I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. Then I washed my face, dried it, and went back out to finish braiding Lily's hair. She asked me in the car if Grandma and Grandpa were going to be there yet, or if they were meeting us there. I said, "It's going to be just us today, Bug, but I'm going to be right in the front, okay? I'm going to see every single second." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Did they forget?" I kept my eyes on the road. They had something come up. It happens to grown-ups sometimes. "Oh," she said. And then she looked out the window and didn't say anything else. For the rest of the drive, and something inside me made a very quiet decision. The recital was beautiful. Lily stood in the 2nd row in her pink tutu, and she found me in the audience within 30 seconds of walking on stage. And when she did, she gave me this enormous, relieved smile, like just seeing my face meant she could breathe again. She did not miss a single step. When it was over, she ran off the stage and into my arms and said, "Did you see me, Mommy? Did you see?" I told her I saw every single thing. That evening I called my mother. She answered from what sounded like a hotel restaurant, background noise and soft music. I asked her how Sedona was. She said it was wonderful, very restorative. I asked her if she remembered that today was Lily's recital. There was a brief pause and she said, "Oh, sweetheart, we sent the apology this morning. We'll do something special with her when we get back," I said. "She made you reserved cards with flower stickers." Another pause. "That's sweet, she's so creative." I said goodnight and hung up. The next morning I called my sister. This was my first mistake in hindsight, because Amber had never once in our adult lives responded to my concerns about our parents with anything other than defense. But I called her anyway because she was my sister and I thought maybe, this time, she might surprise me. She did not surprise me. She did not surprise me. She told me I was being dramatic. She said our parents were allowed to have a life. She said I needed to stop making Lily the center of everything. I want you to think about what that phrase means, the center of everything. Applied to a 4-year-old child who just wanted her grandparents to watch her dance. She said that I had always been this way, always demanding, always needing more than anyone could give. And then she said I was delusional. I told her I'd talk to her later and I hung up. That same week, my mother called and mentioned very casually that my father had been having some cash flow issues with his small business. He owned a landscaping company, had for 20 years. She said they were just a little stretched right now and wondered if I might be able to help. $30,000, she said, just to bridge the gap until a contract came through. I asked how much Amber and Derek had contributed. A pause. "They have their own expenses. The new house, you know." I said I would look at my finances and get back to her. I did look at my finances and get back to her. I did look at my finances. What I found, because I am a compliance analyst and this is what I do, I look at numbers until they tell me the truth, was that my father's business had not had a profitable quarter in nearly 2 years. The cash flow issue was not a temporary bridge situation. The business was failing, and more than that, when I cross-referenced the timing, I found that Amber and Derek had already received $50,000 from my parents in the form of a loan the previous year that had never been documented, never been discussed with me, and was not being repaid. I called my mother back. I said I wasn't going to be able to help financially. She was disappointed but gracious about it on the phone. The conversation with Amber that followed was not gracious. She called me selfish. She said family helps family. She said I had always been cold, always been calculating, always cared more about my spreadsheets than about people. She said that if I couldn't step up when the family needed me, then maybe I shouldn't expect the family to step up for me. I wrote that last sentence down in my notes app, word for word, the second after she said it. 6 months passed. I kept working. I took on additional clients at my firm as a private consultant on the side. This was something I had been slowly building for 2 years. A separate practice where I helped companies audit their internal financial controls. By this point, my consulting income was roughly equal to my salary. I had not told my family this, not because I was hiding it, but because they had never asked about my work in any meaningful way. Lily started kindergarten. She loved it. She made 3 best friends in the first week and came home every day with a drawing to put on the refrigerator. And then my father's business collapsed. Not slowly. All at once. A major contract fell through, creditors called in debts, and the business closed in a matter of weeks. My parents lost a significant amount in the fallout, and suddenly they needed help. Real help. Not 30,000 but considerably more. My mother called me crying. My father texted me a number. And then my sister called and told me that this was the moment. This was when I needed to show up. This was what family was for. She and Derek were doing what they could, but their financial situation was complicated. And I thought about that $50,000 loan they had taken and never repaid. And she said I had a good job. I was single so my expenses were lower. I could help more than anyone else. She said, "You don't even have a husband to worry about. It's just you." I want you to understand that she said this like it was a casual observation. Like the fact that I had raised my daughter alone for 3 years while working full-time was a kind of privilege, a simplicity, rather than the hardest thing I had ever done. I told her I needed a few days to think. I spent those few days not thinking about whether to give money, because I had already decided the answer to that. I spent those few days pulling together documentation, every financial record I could find that was relevant, the undocumented loan to Amber and Derek, the tax filings for my father's business, the timeline of when certain decisions were made. I am very good at this. I have spent years learning how to build a clear, airtight picture of a financial situation. I also spent those days talking to an attorney, not because I had done anything wrong, but because I wanted to understand exactly what my rights were, and exactly what my parents and sister could and could not ask of me, legally, as an adult child in this state. The answer, as it turned out, was not much. I called a family meeting. My parents drove to my apartment, which was the first time they had been inside it in almost a year. Amber and Derek came too. Amber already tight-lipped and braced for a fight. I made coffee. I sat everyone down. And then I laid the documents on the table. I had printed everything, the business records, the loan history, the timeline. I had organized it the way I organize things at work, cleanly, clearly, so that there was no ambiguity about what I was showing them. I said, before we talk about how I can help, I want to make sure we're all looking at the same picture. My father stared at the papers. My mother picked one up and put it back down. Derek said nothing. Amber said, "Where did you get these?" I said, "I'm a compliance analyst. This is what I do." My father said the business issues were more complicated than they looked on paper. I said, "I know. That's why I looked at all of it, not just part of it." I then explained, quietly and without raising my voice, that I had spent some time thinking about what I could offer. I said I was willing to help, genuinely willing, but that any financial assistance would need to be documented, structured, and equitable, meaning that the existing undocumented loan to Amber and Derek would need to be formally acknowledged and included in any calculation of family contributions. Amber said I was being vindictive. I said I was being a compliance analyst. My father looked at the table. My mother said, "We didn't think you'd notice." I let that sentence sit in the room for a moment. Then I said, "I notice everything. That's also what I do." Derek spoke for the first time. He said that I had no idea how hard they had worked, how much pressure they were under, and that it was easy to sit back and play the victim when you'd been alone your whole adult life without real responsibilities. I picked up my phone and pulled up my consulting portfolio. I handed it to him and said, "This is what I've built in 2 years on the side of my full-time job, while raising my daughter alone." I don't mention it to feel superior. I mention it because I want you to understand that I am not asking you to help me. I have never asked any of you for help, and I am not going to be spoken to as though I have. Derek handed my phone back without looking at it. My mother started crying. She said she just wanted the family to come together. I said I wanted that too. I had always wanted that. I had wanted it the morning of Lily's recital when I read a text that said my parents had chosen a spa weekend over watching their 4-year-old granddaughter dance for the first time on a stage. I had wanted it when Lily asked me from the back seat if they had forgotten her. The room went very quiet. My father closed his eyes. I said I had spoken to an attorney, and I wanted to be transparent about that. I said there was nothing legal they could compel me to do, but I was not mentioning that to threaten anyone. I was mentioning it because I wanted the conversation we were having to be an honest one, not one where I was being pressured into a decision I hadn't made freely. I said I was willing to contribute $20,000, documented, structured as a formal loan, with a written repayment agreement, and contingent on the existing undocumented loan to Amber and Derek being formalized as well, so that all contributions were on equal footing. Amber said that was insulting. I said the alternative was zero, and that was also on the table. My father said, "That's enough." Not to me. To Amber. She looked at him. He looked at the table. And then he said very quietly that he thought my terms were reasonable. Amber stood up and said she couldn't do this. She said I had turned what was supposed to be a family moment into a business transaction, and she didn't recognize me anymore, and she left. Derek followed her. My mother sat at my kitchen table for another hour. We drank coffee. At some point she said, "I didn't know you were doing so well." I said, "You never asked." She looked at her hands. "I think I assumed." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, "She asked me if you forgot her." Lily. In the car on the way to the recital. She was 4 years old and she looked out the window and she said, "Did they forget?" And I had to tell her that something came up. That's what I told her. Something came up. My mother's eyes filled. "I'm not telling you that to hurt you," I said. "I'm telling you because you asked why things feel the way they feel between us, and that's why. That's the whole why." She left an hour later with the documentation, the loan terms, and a copy of the repayment schedule I had drafted. Amber did not speak to me for 4 months. During those 4 months, a few things happened. The formal loan agreement was signed by my parents and witnessed by my attorney. Amber and Derek's prior loan was documented and included in the repayment schedule. My father began restructuring, not the business, which was genuinely finished, but his finances, with help from a professional who was not me, which I had also recommended and which I think was the right boundary to draw. My consulting practice picked up significantly. I took on 2 new corporate clients and hired a part-time assistant. I moved Lily and me into a house, a real house, with a yard and a bedroom that she could actually decorate the way she wanted. She chose yellow walls. Not pale yellow, bright yellow, the color of a highlighter. I let her. And Lily started first grade, and this time, when her school did a family reading day in October, my parents came. Both of them. On time. They sat in those small plastic first-grade chairs, and they listened to Lily read aloud from a picture book about a bear who learns to share. And my mother cried a little, quietly, and my father put his hand over hers. After, Lily took my mother's hand and showed her the classroom hamster and explained his entire personality in great detail. My mother listened to every word. In the parking lot, my father said to me, "I'm sorry we missed the recital." Not, "I'm sorry things got complicated," or, "I'm sorry you felt hurt." Just, "I'm sorry we missed it." I said, "She was incredible." He nodded. "I don't doubt it. We are not, my family and I, the kind of close that we maybe could have been if things had been different. Amber and I speak now, occasionally, and it is polite and careful the way things are between people who love each other from a safe distance. Derek and I have an understanding that is basically 2 adults who will be in the same room at holidays and behave themselves. But my parents come to things now. They came to Lily's first soccer game and her school winter concert, and last month they took her to the aquarium for her birthday. Just the 3 of them, and she talked about the jellyfish for 4 days. That's not everything I once thought family was supposed to be. But it's real, and I decided a long time ago that I would rather have something real and small than something large that was made entirely of performance. The $20,000 was repaid, in full, ahead of schedule. My father dropped off the final check in person and we had dinner together, just the 2 of us, at a diner near my office. He ordered the same thing he always orders, a patty melt and a black coffee, and we talked about ordinary things. Lily's school, his garden, a book I was reading. Before he left he said, "You always were the sharp one." I said, "I know." He laughed. First time I had heard him laugh in a while. I drove home with the windows down even though it was cold, and I thought about Lily at home with her babysitter, probably already in her pajamas, and the yellow walls in her room, and the drawings covering our refrigerator. I thought about her in the car that Saturday in March, quiet, looking out the window. I thought about the moment she found me in the audience at the recital, and her whole face opened up like a door. Some things you do for justice. Some things you do for principle. But some things, the documenting and the attorney and the sitting down at the table with the papers spread out and your voice steady and your hands still. Some things you do because there is a little girl who asked if she was forgotten, and the answer has to be no. The answer will always be no. I've thought a lot about the word selfish since that afternoon in my kitchen with the documents spread across the table. Amber used it against me like it was a weapon she'd been sharpening for years. And the thing is, for a long time I let it land. I let it make me question myself. I let it make me smaller. Because when someone who is supposed to love you calls you selfish for having boundaries, for saying no, for protecting what little you have, some part of you wonders if they're right. They're not right. But it takes time to know that in your bones. What I understand now is that the choices people make always catch up with them. Not in some cosmic dramatic way. Just in the quiet, ordinary way that reality tends to reassert itself. My father made a choice to run his business without transparency. My mother made a choice to fund Amber's lifestyle while pretending the books were balanced. Amber made a choice to take, and frame it as love. And every one of those choices created a consequence that eventually landed on that table, in plain black and white, irrefutable. I didn't engineer their downfall. I just refused to participate in the fiction anymore. That's the thing nobody tells you about being the difficult one in a family. The one who asks questions, who notices things, who won't just go along. They call it difficult because it is, for them. It disrupts the comfort of the arrangement. But what looks like disruption from the inside of a broken system looks like clarity from the outside. I thought about Lily a lot during all of it. I thought about what I was modeling for her, because she is watching me, every day, whether I remember it or not. She watched me sit down at that table and open that folder with steady hands. She watched me not cry when Amber left. She watched me make coffee for my mother and sit with her in the quiet aftermath and say the hard true thing, that a 4-year-old asked if she'd been forgotten, and that question was the whole answer. What I want Lily to know, when she's old enough to understand it, is this. Intelligence without courage is just information. You can know everything and still say nothing. You can see the whole picture and still let people convince you that what you see isn't real. The part that matters is being willing to put the folder on the table, to sit in the discomfort of the room going quiet, to let people reckon with facts without softening them into something easier to swallow. And the other thing, the thing I had to learn the hardest way, is that taking care of yourself is not the same as abandoning people. I did not abandon my family. I helped them. I just helped them on terms that were honest, documented, and fair. That's not coldness. That's what integrity actually looks like when it has to function in the real world, not just as an idea. My father paid back every dollar. He showed up to first grade reading day in a plastic chair and held my mother's hand while Lily read about a bear who learns to share. That happened because I held a line, not because I abandoned one. Some things repair. Some things don't. Either way, you have to be able to look at your kid across a kitchen table and know that you showed her what it looks like to be someone who doesn't disappear when it gets hard. That's the only legacy I'm interested in leaving.